Mr. Naga, before the lunch adjournment, we were dealing with a document on page 40, Annexure SN5. Just to recap, you say this schedule was prepared by you and your team?
That is correct.
And the purpose was to compute the penalties in order for Eskom's attorneys to launch a claim against Optimum.
That is correct.
Yes. And at this point, you were satisfied that this computation took into account all relevant documents and applied properly the clauses of the agreement in order to come to this amount of 2.1 billion.
Chairperson, at that point in time, we had calculated this number in accordance with the agreement. In hindsight, there were some errors to the spreadsheet, which we'll explain as we go forward.
Yes.
You said that there were certain challenges or problems in the practical application of the principle that you stated. Are you able to just highlight some of those practical, or what caused the practical challenges?
Chair, not all of them, but some of them. I think the contract manager for this would probably better be able to explain all of those. But I know one of them was like the application of the weighted average. So, I mean, rolling average. So in this particular case, the penalty, like I said, says that if you in 3 days penalty, then such percentage applies. 4 days, a different percentage. 5 days, a different. And I know there was a different interpretation where if you, and I'm just using this as an example, if you were 3 days in penalty and the 4th day you were not, then they assumed it to be a different way you calculate the rolling average.
Okay.
That was one of the items, but there were a number, Chair, and I wouldn't know all of them.
Okay, thank you.
And then in paragraph 7.3, if you may turn to page 7 of your statement, you deal or you record the Optimum's failure to comply with the agreement in as far as the quality of the coal is concerned. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And that is from the period of March 2012 to 31 May 2015. Am I correct? That period that you are concerned with in that paragraph.
That is correct.
Yes. May I refer you to Annexure SN6? It's on page 42, Mr. Chair.
What page? 32.
Page 42. 42.
Okay.
Would that be one of the agreements that you are referring to?
Yes, one of the clauses of the agreement.
Yes.
Yes.
And the clause that you place reliance on in order to demonstrate how the penalties are computed, or what one takes into account when computing the penalties, it's clause 3.4 on page 42.
That's correct.
Now, can I ask you, for the importance of this clause, simply to read in clause 3.4.2 up until 3.4.33. It starts on page 42, clause 3.4.2, if you can read it.
Yes.
Proceed to read it.
You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
All coal to be supplied and delivered by Optimum Colliery to Eskom in terms of this addendum shall have an ash content which shall not exceed 28.8%, it being recorded that it is the intention of the parties that the typical C calorific value of the coal supplied and delivered by Optimum Colliery to Eskom shall not be less than 23 megajoules per kilogram, calculated on a moisture-free basis.
Before you proceed to another clause, can you simplify what is being conveyed in that clause?
Sure. What basically it's saying is that the coal supplied should not have an ash content, meaning the remember we spoke about the different qualities of the coal. So your ash content shall not be greater than 28.8, and your CV value, the energy quantity of the coal on a moisture-free basis, should not be less than 23 megajoules per kilogram.
And when the coal is being supplied to Eskom, this is one of the things that will be taken into account, whether does it comply on or not with this laws.
Yes, Chair. So this is not the only thing.
Yes.
And I said this is one of the clauses. One of the complexities of this contract is, and if I can give some context,
please.
There is the main coal supply agreement that was signed in 1993, and then there are a few addendums post that contract. I think there are about 3 or 4 addendums. Now, this is, I think, addendum 1, this 3.4, and it refers to coal qualities that are now amending the original coal supply agreement. But there were coal qualities subsequent to this that were also amended. So when you read this agreement, and when you refer to qualities, this is the quality corridor in how you would calculate the differential between what you received versus what the contract says. But in understanding what the contract says, you actually need to read all 3 or 4 addendums together with the main agreement to see what quality parameters are there. So this is what this clause says, but I just need to make sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I understand. So if I understand your evidence correctly, you're saying that this is one of the clauses that you looked at, 3.4.
Yes.
But there are also other addenda which you went through in order to compute the penalties which Eskom was entitled to.
That is correct.
And it's your evidence that from having looked at all those documentation, Eskom came to the conclusion that Optimum was failing to supply the coal in respect of what was specified in those agreements, including the addenda.
That is correct.
Yes.
That is correct, Chair, based on an interpretation of the agreement.
Yes.
Yes.
The interpretation of the agreement was done by individuals within Eskom who knew exactly how to compute the penalties, and that is the reason, and that is why you produced subsequent schedules reflecting the penalty amount.
Chair, to clarify that point,
Yes.
the computation, as you had earlier stated, is the result of an interpretation. The interpretation, there was a difference in interpretation between Eskom and Glencore. The settlement of an Eskom interpretation of the agreement was done between, call it the Eskom contract management team managing this contract, our legal counsel being Cliff Decker, and my finance team. So they settled on an interpretation, and this computation is based on that interpretation of the agreement.
I understand. I'm concentrating for now on the side of Eskom.
Okay.
That from the officials of Eskom, those who were tasked with computing the penalties, you took into account all the relevant documentation, applicable clauses, applicable addenda, and you arrived at a particular figure.
That is correct.
That's what I'm saying.
That's correct.
And you were happy premise on what you have done, that amount that you came with was what Eskom was entitled to.
At that point, yes.
Now, may I refer you to page 8, paragraph 7.4. In this paragraph, you refer to the spreadsheet that was prepared by Mr. Kruger for the period 1st March 2012 to 31 May 2015. Can you summarize for us the contents of this paragraph and the involvement of Mr. Kruger or your team?
Chairperson, so like I had before lunch given context that there was this cooperation agreement, the cooperation agreement ended, we were asked to compute this penalty. I had asked Mr. Kruger to help me calculate this penalty. In arriving at this calculation, we used the agreement as we have said. The computation was done together with the contract managers, and our legal team, it was important to stress that because there was a difference in opinion, we had to interpret what we thought the agreement said. And based on that, we arrived at a computation.
And what was the role of Mr. Opperman?
Mr. Opperman was the contract manager for Optimum Colliery, the Optimum Colliery coal supply agreement at that point in time. So he would have played an integral part in the interpretation as well as the calculation of this penalty.
Did he do a separate computation, or the computation that we are seeing here were done by the entire team, including Mr. Opperman, Mr. Kruger, yourself, and other team members?
No, there was one calculation, to my understanding, and it was this calculation. So Chairperson, it's also important in terms of clause 7.4 to point out something. And that is, if you're looking at the schedule SN5 in front of you, this A3 schedule, I'd earlier indicated to you there was a 2.176 billion amount that was calculated, which is this dark gray shade there.
Yeah.
Just to the left of that, you can see an amount of 158.4 million rand.
Yes.
Now, if you sort of just look up, you can see the various months that the penalties were charged. So initially, the penalty that was applied by Eskom for the period March 2012 to May 2014 amounted to 158 million.
That's the amount on to the left of
the 2.1 billion.
2.1 billion.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm saying what we found when we were asked to compute this calculation was that there were penalties that were levied. And those penalties, like I said, or indicate, totaled 158 million for the different months. And it's important, one, that we give you context that as we give evidence here, that we take this into account, that 158 million was originally deducted.
Yes.
Do I just continue?
No.
No, okay.
Just before you proceed, now, under that column, which ends with the 158 million rand, it's reflected that over a certain number of months, I don't know how many, maybe 6, I don't know, there was 0 penalty for each month. Is that right?
That is correct, Chair. And
I don't know if you must have applied your mind also to, or would that have been because at the time of doing the calculation, the penalties for those months had not yet been imposed or collected or deducted?
No, Chair. For the months that you see 0, is the months where there was this cooperation agreement between Eskom and Glencore that suspended.
Yes.
So that's why there's 0. So there was 0 penalties applied by Eskom during that cooperation agreement process.
Okay.
Yeah.
But once the cooperation agreement was terminated, that meant that the entire terms of the agreement became applicable.
Absolutely.
And when you compute, you'll also take into account that period when it was suspended.
Well, the penalties became applicable after the cooperation agreement ended, like you had said. So for the period going back, you would have to compute what penalties were due and payable.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Now, let's go to page 9 and page 10 and explain to the chair how did those computations come to be. Page 9 and page 10 of your statement.
Sure. So
we are now moving away from that SN50. We are trying to understand what then happened subsequently.
Yes. So so the investigating team, when we put this affidavit together, requested us to look at this 158 million that was paid, that was initially deducted from Glencore. And they requested us to give a detail of what was deducted, for what penalties, what was applied. So, Chairperson, if you look at SN 009, you will see that, and if I can sort of orientate you, you can see right at the bottom on the right-hand side corner, you'll see the total amounting to 158,386.
Yes.
So that's the 158 million total penalty that was applied.
And is that the same amount that we were looking at on the spreadsheet?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Now the columns before that, so the first column on the table deals with AI penalties, then the next column is CV penalty, and I know it's not that legible. So the first column is AI, the second column is CV, the third column is ASH, and the fourth column is sizing.
Please remind me, what would be AI again?
AI would be abrasive index the abrasive index quality.
Okay.
Then it's the CV quality. Then it's your ASH. Then it's your sizing. So, Chairperson, you can see that for the period, from the period March 2012 all the way down to May 2014, the sizing quality parameter was never applied.
And now, if it wasn't applied, if you go back to this table that you have explained to us, AI, CV, ASH, and sizing, which one carries most penalties? In the context of this matter?
In the context of this computation, the sizing carries the maximum, the most amount of penalties, if you use the interpretation of the agreement.
All right, proceed.
Yeah. If I take you back to...
before you do that, you just talked to us about the sizing penalties. Does the fact that it's blank under that column until 406 million, does it mean that during that period, March 2012 to August 2013, there were no issues of sizing that between the parties? In other words, ESCOM wasn't complaining about the size and so on?
No.
It doesn't mean that?
No.
Okay, what does it mean?
All this table is basically trying to reflect is what penalties were actually applied.
Oh, they were not applied in regard to sizing.
Yes.
Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean there were no issues. There were no complaints. There might have been complaints, but no penalties were applied.
That is correct.
Okay.
So sizing, so one of the things when you look at this calculation of the penalties that were levied for the period March 2012 to 2014, sizing was never applied. If you just look to the left of sizing, you can see that the CV and ASH penalty were also not applied for the period March 2012 all the way to August 2013.
That is where there's now blanks. There's nothing that is indicated.
Yes, in the blanks. So the fact that there's a blank, it was never applied. And we're saying that they were. So if you look at the SN5 spreadsheet orientation, you can see there's penalties everywhere on all the different quality parameters. But during this period, those were never applied. And the AI penalty was applied, but the AI penalty was applied at a rate which was not escalated. So the contract says that if you've got a 10 Rand per ton penalty for AI, and I'm just using that as an illustrative purposes, the 10 Rand escalates with inflation over time. This application in this 158 million, the 10 Rand was never escalated, or the base price for the AI was never escalated. So this was just sort of giving an appreciation of what the 158 million that was originally deducted, what it comprised of. If I then, Chair, go to the next page, which is SN10.
And also this 158, what it did not take into account.
Just repeat that, please.
I'm saying that this 158, you're also indicating what it did not take into account also.
Yes, so that's correct, yes. So, Chairperson, on SN10, you can see this is the calculation So we were then asked, compare the 2.1 billion calculation that you did to this 158 million and explain. This table just merely sets that out. But Chair, what this table is basically stating, and it's exactly what I've told you now, that you can see sizing was never applied. The ash penalty and the CV penalties were not applied for the period March 2012 to September 2019. And the AI penalty between March 2012 and September 2013 was applied at a different rate, or an incorrect rate. And Chair, I summarized that on
page 11.
Page 11.
So what we see on page 11 is that comparison that you have done between page 9 and page 10.
That is correct.
And the summary as to what was missing, what was not done, one can find it on page 11.
Yes, under those A, B, and C tabs.
All right. Now, may I refer you to page 53?
Sorry, I look at
53? Page 53. Now, can you take us through that, identify that document and take us through it?
This is an email from Suzanne Daniels, and the email is to me and copying Rishabhan Mudli from Cliff Decker. And the subject of the email is Eskom/Optimum. And it basically states, "Hi Snell, can you please look at Annexure A of the attached documents and verify the contents of paragraph 6 for me? We are in the process of settling this matter, and I will need assistance that the figures and calculations are correct. Kindly revert soonest. Regards, Suzanne." And it's important to note that this email is sent on the 2nd of March 2017 at 6:23 p.m.
Yes. Now, this will be now the second computation that you are now requested to do. The first one, you've already taken the chair through it, and the amounts of the first one, am I correct?
Chair, so in 2015, please do a computation. Here's the computation for the purposes of a claim.
Yes.
In 2017, this is an email that says, we have settled this, per this email, we are busy we're in the process of settling this matter.
Yeah.
And can you please verify the computations of the attached document? Now, the Annexure A the Annexure A they refer to in this email in paragraph 6 is on...
We'll come to that, but
okay.
I just want to capture some of the important facts here. Now, during this time, would I be correct that now this during the Tegeta period, when now the mine is it's owned by Tegeta, when the settlement is now being reached?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes. All right. You are saying that you are now referred to Annexure A. That Annexure A, you'll find it on page 63. Mr. Chair, and it's marked as Annexure SN9B. Is this a document that you're referring to that was annexed to the email of the 2nd March 2017?
That is correct.
And you were requested to specifically look at paragraph 6. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Could you please read paragraph 6 into the record?
So paragraph 6 says, the amounts for September and May of the calculation table submitted by Eskom is incorrect. The agreement is specific that the penalties will be limited to the amount of the distribution fee in the event of the penalty amount exceeding the distribution fee. The amounts should be 66.38 million and 63.45 million, respectively. Be that as it may, purely in an attempt to settle the matter, we will not make an issue of these amounts. Paragraph 6 then continues to the next page, Chair. It says, our previous offer of 238.9 million was based on the following calculation, and they reflect the table of how they get to this 239 million. It then further goes on to say, Our final offer now is an amount of 254.9 million in full and final settlement. The amount is calculated as follows, and they table a calculation arriving at the 254 million that they refer to.
So this is against the background of the computation that your team did, which reflected at least an amount of 2.1 billion rands.
That is correct.
Yes. Now, in order to address the request from Ms. Daniels, you had to look at certain documents in order to recalculate the amounts. Am I correct?
That is correct.
May I refer you to page 58? Now, that is the email which you received from, this is the email that you sent to, among others, Ms. Susanna Daniels, am I correct?
That is correct.
And what documents did you have to consider in terms of that email?
So Chairperson, before we get to this email, the initial email was, please look at paragraph 6 of that document, which was a negotiated position.
It was Annex A to the email.
Annex A, paragraph 6. I then requested for supporting documentation, and the documentation came from Ms. Ayanda and Teta, and that's reflected in Annexure SN8A. I then reviewed her computations that was sent to us, and let me confirm that those computations that were sent were this 2.1 billion penalty that we calculated in 2015, which we knew had already some issues to it. And SN9, which is, Advocate, where you are taking me to now,
Yes.
is the response after looking at this computation over the weekend,
Yes.
when we were requested to look at it.
And what do you take into account?
So, Chairperson, maybe for ease of reference,
You say that I've looked at the following documents and spreadsheet.
yes,
Can you take us through what is contained in that email? Page 58.
sure. It's hi Suzanne, Rushaban, Ayanda, and Jackwell. I've looked at the following docs and spreadsheets. PDF, a claim. A PDF document, optimum letter. PDF, CDH response. I've looked at the following spreadsheets. The penalty sheet sent to CDH in July 2015. Penalty sheet split into the period, into the penalized period March 2012 to May 2014. It is the CDH spreadsheet derived from the ESCOM spreadsheet. Penalty sheet split into the period June 2014 to May 2015, which is the CDH spreadsheet derived from the ESCOM spreadsheet. A recalculation or an updated version of the penalty sheet taking some errors in the original spreadsheet into account. I have attached a spreadsheet that summarizes the issues. I've also indicated some concerns that I think we may have in the settlement agreement. Please note that this was a really short time to review this calc. I was also not party to the negotiations, and thus I have no understanding of the negotiated position. I, however, suggest that maybe Rushaban, Jacko, Christo, Ayanda, and I meet to briefly discuss the above sheet. You guys can take a view on the way forward after that.
And the sheet that you now annex, after having taken into account on those documents, is the one to be found on page 61?
Correct.
Yes. Now, would you take us through that schedule in order to explain to the chair the amount you ultimately come to as a fair amount for, or to be paid, to ESCOM in relation to the penalties?
Sure. Chair, maybe some context and then maybe some guidance from you.
Yes.
So, on the 2nd of March 2017, we get this request, please review this calculation and the negotiated position, and let us know your views. Now, between the 2nd of March and the 8th of March, there's been, and it's documented in the affidavit, but there's been correspondence about the different versions of the spreadsheet and the positions we arrive at. By the time we got to the 8th of March, we have substantially looked at quite a bit of the calculations to arrive at what we did. Would you, and per your guidance, would you want me to go through every version of the spreadsheet, or would you want me to settle on which is effectively SN11B?
If you can tell the chair the difference between SN9A and ultimately SN11B, which is one you're settling upon, because that will help us to understand how you arrive at those computations.
So SN9A, so the only difference between SN9A and SN11B is correcting our version of the updated spreadsheet. So we had a computation in July 2015. We knew there were issues with this computation. In July 2017, all we're doing is we're updating this computation to reflect correctly. And between the 2nd of March and the 8th of March, we arrive at call it a final computation. And that's the difference between SN9A and 11B.
Now, SN11B, Mr. Chair, is to be found on page 75. If you can then take us through that final version and the amount which you would have recommended if you ask as a settlement figure.
Yeah. So, Chairperson, if I can bring you back to this 2.1 billion calc spreadsheet that we refer to.
Mr. Chair, we have it on the A3 because the copy.
Yeah. Yes. Also on SA5, isn't it?
Yes.
Is it SAN5, the one that was on that dark column? It's the same amount, 2.1 billion.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, in orientating you through the spreadsheet, and there's a lot of detail here, so I'm going to try my best to summarize what we find, but I need you to think about 4 concepts. The first concept is that the original calculation, this 2.1 billion penalty, was a calculation for all the different quality parameters. That's the first thing we need to consider. The second thing is that there is this period between March 2012 and May 2014. It is a period when this 158 million rand was applied. So that is one period, and the second period is from June 2014 to May 2015. So in assessing this penalty, they're actually looking at 2 periods. They introduce one more concept, which is linked to this, to all the penalties being charged. And so the 2.1 billion rand penalty, the claim, was based on all the penalty parameters, including the sizing parameter. And when I now go through this computation, I'm also going to consider the penalty excluding the sizing parameter. So when you look at SN11B, and if you look at the first column, so the first column is just describing what you see on your right-hand side, but it says there Word PDF documents, and it says settlement agreement, optimum letter, CDH response.
Yes.
Okay, the second agreement is, it says 2015 July 06.
Second column.
Second column, yes. Penalty master CDH version. Chair, the second column is this original 2.1 billion computation.
Just hang on 1 second.
Yeah.
This SN11B isn't available on the spreadsheet. No, it's not available.
It is, electronically.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You have it first on page 75, and you have it, a copy that we have produced, the A3 size document.
Thank you, I found it.
So, Chair, like I said, I must apologize. There's a lot of detail here, but I'll get to the punch point in a second. So, the settlement agreement, that's the first column. The second column is call it July 2015 calculation. The third and fourth column just splits the July the 2015 calculation into the March 2014 period and the 2015 period. And if you can ignore it for purposes of this.
Hang on 1 second. On SN11B, when you talk about the first column, are you talking about the one which is written at the top, Annexure B settlement agreement, or are you talking about the one written settlement agreement stroke optimum letter, CHD response letter?
The letter, Chair.
Okay, all right. That's what you regard as the first column.
Yes.
Okay.
The second column is the 2.1 billion calc that was done in 2015.
Yes.
Ignore for now, Chair, the third and fourth columns. And the fifth column, where it says 2017 0303 updated penalty master.
Yes.
That is the latest.
So that will be, we'll call that what, the fifth column?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth column is the latest version of the calculation.
Okay.
Okay? So Chairperson, and then the column after that is just comparing the difference between what we originally calculated and this new version.
Yes.
Okay, so if I can get to some punchline points on this finding, if you want to call it. The first thing, Chair, is that on a total basis, if you look at the 2.1 billion rand claim, 2176530,611 which was originally calculated in 2015.
Yes, the original.
Yes, you can see that changes to 2175894. So there's a 600,000 rand difference there, Chair. So largely the 2.1 billion rand number doesn't really change.
Which number doesn't change?
I'm saying there's a 600,000 rand difference between the 2.1 billion calculated in July 2015 and this updated version. So I'm saying the 2.1 billion in essence is still 2.1 billion.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Okay. And now I'm going to go to the bottom part under the black shaded area which says calculations refer from March 2012 to May 2014. And the first figure I'm referring to, it says total claim for the period including sizing is 1590, which is under the original calculation. So second column, you'll see 1590. And you can see the updated calculation is 1589, so it's still the 600,000 rand difference.
Yes.
And this is now on the calculation including sizing.
Including size will now mean including everything, including size.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, all right.
But Chair, the very next row after that, you can see that we had paid, or we had deducted from Optimum 158 million rand worth of penalties. So I'm looking at the second column, 1590,452.
Yes, yeah.
Less the 158 million, which is the penalty we had deducted for the period March 2012 to May 2014.
Yes.
So the net penalty, if you really wanted to claim from Optimum, if you include all the penalty parameters, should be 1.4 billion rand.
Yes.
And if you use the updated spreadsheet, you can see it's still 1.
That's the figure under the fifth column.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's 1432 under the second column, 1431 under the first column. It's still the same 600,000 rand difference you see.
Yes.
Yeah. So the punchline here is that if you had, for this portion of it, the punchline is that if you had applied all the penalty parameters using the calculation in the first 2015 versus the calculation now, there isn't much of a difference in the computation. We had updated it, this more correctly reflects, but not much. The issue now becomes is that if you look at this negotiated settlement, it introduces, and I don't know when this introduction happened, but it introduces a penalty excluding the sizing parameter. So if you look, so on that 2.1 billion penalty sheet that I showed you, SN5, if you take away the sizing parameter and you just add the others, Then the total claim on the second column comes to 792 million. It says total claim for the period excluding sizing, 792.8 million.
Yes.
Okay? But on the latest version, you can see that is 883 million. So there's a 90 million rand difference, Chair, if you exclude the sizing parameter.
Yes.
Okay? That is a key finding. So if you deduct from those two amounts the 158 million that was paid, then you have a claim against Optimum for 634 million on the July spreadsheet, or 724 million on this revised spreadsheet.
Mm.
Chairperson, bear with me, I'm almost there.
Yeah.
If I now take the same the same approach to the period June 2014 to May 2015, you can see that the total claim, including sizing, is 744 million for that period. And it's still 744 million in the updated spreadsheet.
So yes, I can
second
see
and fifth column.
744, yes.
But the total claim excluding sizing, so if I remove the sizing parameter, comes to 419,452,346.65 on the 2.1 billion spreadsheet, the original spreadsheet, the July 2015. And in the latest version, that comes to 441,186. So there's a 21 million rand jump between the two versions when you correct it.
I'm trying to look for the 4 million. Did you say 4 million?
No, 419, so it's 419,452. It's the row just below the 744.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So you'll see in the difference column there's a 21 million rand difference.
Yes.
So
that is now excluding.
That's excluding sizing.
Yes.
So, Chairperson, disregarding what the negotiating team or settlement team were negotiating for now, if you look at this calculation, what we're saying is that if you had included the sizing parameter, you would have had a claim, based on our interpretation, of 2.1 billion rand. The 2.1 billion hasn't largely changed.
Yes, yeah.
If you exclude the sizing parameter, then you have a claim of this 1.4 billion rand. Sorry, Chair. You have a claim of the 724 million rand plus this 441 million rand. So if you look at this number, which is sort of bolded and in between two lines, it's 1.16 billion rand.
Yes.
So I'm saying, including sizing, 2.1 billion claim, excluding sizing, 1.1 billion rand claim. That's the parameters that you potentially, from a value point of view, should be claiming. Now, if I go back to the first column...
But size should be included ordinarily, isn't it? The sizing.
When you read the agreement,
the
agreement talks about a sizing penalty that should be applied.
Yes, yes.
For some reason, the sizing penalty was removed.
Yes,
The reason why I cannot tell you.
Okay, all right.
But the question is that according to you and your team, sizing must be included.
Yeah, if you read the agreement, it talks, sizing is applicable. Whether there was a side agreement or a letter or something that excluded it, that I wouldn't know or cannot confirm.
Yes.
Yeah.
In other words, your position was that absent a special arrangement or agreement that may have been entered into between the parties, what's in the agreement should have been applied, and that includes sizing.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what you are saying is you didn't know whether there was some special arrangement that was made for excluding sizing.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the two principal points for me is that including sizing, 2.1 billion, excluding sizing, 1.1 billion. That's the value of the claims you should be chasing after. So if you look at the negotiated settlement, Chair, what the negotiated settlement really refers to, it says, for the period 2012 to 2014, and I'm now looking at the very first column, they settled on an amount of 158 million. And that was the amount that was originally deducted.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the settlement they reach. The second settlement is that for the period June 2014 to May 2015, they say the total claim is 419 million. Now this is comparing it to this original Annexure A paragraph 6. Yeah. So it says...
Is that the 419 that is under the first column?
Yes.
Okay.
So they say it's 419, and actually, if you look at the original calculation, it says 419,452, so there's a 500,000 rand difference.
Yes.
And if you look at our updated computation, it should be actually 441 million. But that's neither here nor there. For now, I'm just explaining their negotiated position. So they come to a number of 419 million. Then they reduce the CV penalty. Now the CV penalty, and I wasn't part of the negotiations or the negotiation proceeding, so I don't understand the concept, but what they have said is, they use the term called binary score, and from my understanding, what I think they were trying to say is that when you look at your quality of coal, there's a direct correlation between your ash and your CV penalty. So if your CV increases, your ash decreases, and the other way around. So for some reason, they've said that the CV penalty now, because of that relationship, is not applicable. And so if you look at the July 2015 spreadsheet, for this period, they took the entire applicable CV and they just removed it out of the penalty. The 126 million.
Yes.
They're saying it's not applicable.
But how can one justify that on a clear interpretation of the agreement as you've already taken the chair through what was supposed to be taken into account?
Chair, I don't know, and as you can even see in this thing, I'm not sure. I don't know what was the justification.
But I'm saying that having regard to what you say that was supposed to be taken into account, that CV penalty was one of the factors that you and your team considered when you arrive at the amount of 2.1 billion.
Absolutely, and if you look at the contract, it constructs for both penalties to be applied. So at the late stage to now say that one doesn't apply was a bit strange.
Yes, proceed.
The third thing is that they deduct this amount of 37,371,688.67 rands. And Chair, we just don't know where.
And what is that? What is the justification?
There's nothing except that it says less GC penalty reduction. So I can't, in terms of this computation, and you can even see, we said, I cannot calculate this amount. We don't know what it is about.
Do you know what is GC?
No.
Was it explained to you?
No. Okay. And we had requested this. So this sheet, in the response to the team, to the negotiating team, it says, yeah, I cannot calculate this amount. I don't know what it's about. So we'd indicated we're not sure. So Chair, the net thing is that the settlement amount now comes to 254.9 million. That's what they effectively settle on. That is the cash that Eskom would receive in settlement of this original 2.1 billion claim. Okay? So and the way this is then sort of justified, if I had to call it, is to say that it is the initial 158 million rand that was already deducted, plus this 419, the figure that I just remembered above, which comes to about 577 million if memory serves me. So those two numbers are the 577 million that Eskom has said they've settled at, less these two deductions, which I'm not too sure about, and less the amount that was already claimed for that period, comes to a net settlement figure of 254 million. And that's what was settled at with Tegeta.
And what's the point about all that?
The point was, Chair, that when you look at the value that was given up, you initially had a claim of 2.1 billion. If you exclude the sizing parameter, you still have a value of 1.1 billion, but the negotiating team settled on a net effective cash settlement of 254 million. That's effectively what you're saying.
What I'm asking is the point that they miscalculated, there was an error, is the point that there was some corruption. What's the point about all of these calculations? So we have taken quite some time to get to it.
No, the point is just, Chair, the question was, the initial claim was 2.1. You're now only settling at 254 million. And some of the items in getting to the 251 are question mark, as in we can't.
Well, if they miscalculated, it's bad and it's unacceptable because ultimately it's taxpayers' money. But if there's no suggestion of corruption having played a role in settling on a much lesser amount, then I'm not sure that we should have spent as much time as we have spent on it.
Chair, certainly.
Let's put the following questions to you. You were specifically requested to consider the letter that came from the other side and to compute what could be a fair amount that was supposed to be paid to Eskom. Am I correct?
Chair, no. We were asked to compute we were asked to check the calculations as per paragraph 6 of that Annexure 6. In coming to that, we come to a different computation as to what Eskom should claim.
Let me take you back to your testimony earlier on. You remember that you said that you had to prepare a document on page 50 for the purposes of the letter of demand to be sent by the attorneys of Eskom. And the amount that you came to was around 2.1 billion. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And in 2017, you are now given a letter to say, go to paragraph 6, and let's look at whether what computation can one arrive at in terms of the penalties which must be paid to Eskom. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You go through these exercises, being requested to do that, you come to an amount yourself and a team to say that whether you look at the 2015 or 2017 computation, the difference is 600,000, but the 2 billion remains. Am I correct?
That's correct.
When the matter gets settled, it gets settled at a very lower amount than the one that you and your team came to. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Yes. Now, let's proceed on the request
Will ultimately my question be answered, Mr. Mkwena? What's the whole point about these calculations?
What is the whole point about the calculations?
Well, I asked him. I don't think he gave me anything near what I'm looking for. Why are we spending time on these calculations? So now the question is to you.
No, Mr. Chair.
You are leading the witness.
To the witness, maybe, Mr. Chair, to say that.
Well, the witness hasn't been able to answer that in any way near to satisfying me, because I thought that maybe we were going to a point where I was going to be told that the low amount at which the matter was settled reflects some corruption. And if that's not the case, I'm not sure why we are spending so much time on these calculations.
Mr. Naga, there's a question from the chair.
Chair, I am certainly not asserting any corruption. I was
you were asked by the investigators.
Yes, I was asked to to give evidence on my role and the outcome of it, and that's what I'm merely presenting.
No, I think it's not your fault, Mr. Naga. I think.
But are you able to explain, Mr. Naga, why such a low amount was settled upon?
No, Chair, I was not part of the negotiating team, and therefore I cannot explain the low settlement number.
Mr. Chair, the other witnesses will be testifying about the role players in this entire settlement, but he's giving his version as a person that computed.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I don't see the relevance of all the calculations if it's not going to if it's not made to support any assertion that people who made those calculations or people who arrived at that settlement did so on the basis of any corrupt intentions.
Yes.
If it was just some bona fide error, why do we would spend so much time on it?
Mr. Naga, could this 2.1 to 2.5
or even
million,
if it was not bona fide, if it was not corrupt or criminal, then I don't see why we should spend a lot of time on it.
this witness
So
wanting
I
clarification.
could have been told, we calculated that the amount should be 2, whatever. The amount owed to ESCOM was 2.1 billion rand. They settled on a certain amount that we don't understand, but then we could have moved on after that if there is no assertion that they arrived at the low amount because of corruption.
Mr. Chair, note that this witness, the purpose of this witness is different from the other witnesses.
Yes.
He's
Ultimately, will that be pursued?
He's still, yes,
Okay.
by other witnesses.
Okay.
He's here as a CA who did the computation,
Yeah.
who was requested to do it. He says that we did it. Upon doing it, this is what we could have recommended to be the fair amount.
Well, if I'm told that this is laying a foundation for a witness who will come later on and say that amount was settlement amount was arrived at because of corruption, then that I understand. It's just that I didn't understand that
Yes.
I was told that before. You might have told me, I'm not sure. But if I know that it's a foundation for a witness who will come and make that's fine.
Yes, Chair. May we complete the picture about, by referring this witness to page 15. On page 15, Mr. Naga, at paragraph 7.8, a request is made to you by Ms. Daniels that you must sign a memorandum in support of the settlement agreement.
That is correct.
Let's wait for the chair to find the page.
Yes, I found it, thank you.
So you say that a request was made to you that you must sign a memorandum in support of the settlement agreement, and your answer is yes.
Yes.
Now, may I refer to page 80, Chair? And take us through those email correspondence. They still refer to the memo and take the chair in relation to the stance you took on the request that was made to you. Page 80.
Sure. So,
Identify the document and where was it coming from, to who?
Chairperson, this is an email from myself on Tuesday, March the 14th, 2017 at 9 a.m. And it's basically to Suzanne and Ayanda, and I'm copying Rishab and Woodley. And the subject is the optimum settlement memo. Chairperson, actually, my apologies, if I take you to the bottom of the email
Sorry,
and
the
I
bottom
run you
one.
through the thread of the email, it'll probably be better. So, there's an email from me to Suzanne and Ayanda in Teta on Monday, the 13th March 2017 at 4:17 p.m. And I basically say, hi Suzanne and Ayanda, please find attached comment that I prefer would be added in paragraph 1 under financial implications. So to give you context, I had been given a memo to say, can I please sign as support, The memo was for the settlement of this 200 million or the 500 million rand penalty. It's effectively a 200 million rand cash settlement, the one we were just referring to in all these calculations. So I had been requested to sign that memo. I was uncomfortable with the memo, and Chair, if you go to...
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Naka.
Yes.
We have dealt with these calculations at quite some length. I may have missed something. There was that email that you had received, which had said, look at paragraph 6.
Yes.
You remember?
Yes.
You looked at paragraph 6, and what was your response? And is this where your response is? Where was your response to respond to that email and say whether you found paragraph 6 in order or not in order?
Chairperson, there isn't a response as such. The responses are on the Excel spreadsheet with all the comments that were written on the spreadsheet itself.
Yes, yes.
And those comments were discussed with the team.
Yes.
The team then went back, took into account what was said, and came then with a settlement offer.
No, hang on.
Yes?
Where is your response to the email that said, look at paragraph 6? Mr. Mkwena, you may be able to assist. I don't know whether I missed it or whether we haven't gone back to it. I just want to connect that because I want to
If you go to page SN9, one of the documents, page 58. Would that be one of the series of the documents which led to Annexure 11, SN11B?
That is correct, Chair. So here's the response, and I detailed that the findings are in the spreadsheet.
Okay, I'm sorry. Your response to that email, which among others requested you to look at paragraph 6, is at SN9. Is that what you're saying?
That's the email, and the attachment to the email was the different versions, the SN9A, 11A, and 11B that I referred to earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, effectively, you were not happy with paragraph 6.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you indicated why.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
And then there was a response to that or not immediately?
Well, here's one response saying thank you for working through the issue so quickly, but there was another email which I had if you look at SN10, Chair, which is on
Yes.
page 66.
Yes.
And on page 66, the point of this email is that after sending that response out, we had, via the email sequence on SN10, set up a few telecons and meetings to discuss the findings. And the outcome of that, like I said, was eventually SN11B.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now I understand. Okay.
So this occurred between 2nd of March and 8th of March.
Yes.
Then,
Okay.
then we are now on page 80,
Yes.
which is now post 8th March. So on the 8th, between the 2nd of March and the 8th of March, we had given our response to what we thought was our view on paragraph 6. On the 14th of March, or 13th, 14th of March, I am now requested to sign a memo in support of this 577 million rand settlement, which was effectively a 254 million rand cash settlement.
Which is contrary to what your ultimate computation of 2.1 billion.
Which is contrary to our claim, yes. And
Yes.
Because on your calculations, if you followed what the contract said should happen, ultimately you remained with the amount of 2.1 billion rand as the amount that Eskom was entitled to in terms of penalties. Is that right?
that is correct, based on the contract and based on our interpretation. of the
Yeah,
contract.
on your
Yes.
interpretation. In other words, if it was up to you, that's what you would have demanded.
Yes,
To
correct.
be paid to Eskom.
Yes.
Yes. And then you are now being given a memorandum, and you are asked to support it. And that memorandum, if you support it, would mean that Eskom should get much far less than what you believed Eskom was entitled to.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, okay, you may continue.
So,
I think
Chair,
it's important to deal with the contents of paragraph of page 80 so that we can lay the context.
So Chair, initially when I received this document, I was asked to support this, the memo. And the memo, if I can refer to it, is in, the final memo is SN 14, it's on page 84.
Yes.
So this was the final memo, but the memo before that I was asked to sign, I was uncomfortable to sign it because there was a settlement figure of, like I said, 577 and the calculations that I've taken you through. But there was no reference to the work that we had performed. It was just, let's settle. So if you look at page number 82, which is SN 13A.
Yes.
At the bottom, we had said that, and this, the context of this email that we were discussing is to say, we think this should be as a minimum included in this memo before we, you know, we can consider signing. And ultimately, what we were trying to do here is to show the, call it the approvers of this transaction, that by agreeing to the settlement of 500 or 200, however you look at it, you're effectively giving away 1.17 billion rand worth of value, excluding sizing, and 2.1 billion including sizing, so that the memo completes the picture of, for those parties that are approving, you understand what's at play. And I think that's the context of this.
But let's go back to page 80 and read what you say to Ms. Daniels and Ayanda Ntete. The top email, what do you say? Read it.
So initially, Suzanne, if I follow the thread again, so I had read the first part of the thread, which was at the bottom. The middle part says, Snell, this is now Suzanne to myself and Ayanda and copying Rishabhan. Snell, your preference is noted. Not sure what you seek to achieve with this, as the claim was issued for 2.1 billion based on Eskom's calculations, which we state early in the document. Please advise. I took a notch through the document yesterday, and we're expected to finalize this morning. Would like clarity on this as soon as possible. So my response to her, Chair, was, hi Suzanne, if the document I am to sign has no reference to the work we performed, then why am I signing the document? I'm happy you remove my signature from the document.
And what is the work you have performed?
The work that I performed was the calculation in agreeing to paragraph 6 and the computation of the penalty.
So you are not prepared to sign a memo that does not reflect a true computation according to you?
Yes, or the work that we have performed, yes.
You had conveyed to them that on your calculations and on your interpretation of the agreement, the amount that should be demanded should be 2.1 billion rand.
That is correct.
And she seems to say in her email to you that you have just read, that is Ms. Daniels, she seems to say, we did demand that. You agree with me, that's what she says?
That is correct.
Yes. But she seems to say, now we are settling. We are settling, so that's my understanding of what she is saying, that the amount, the reason why the amount is different is not because they disregarded the amount that you believed should be demanded. They did demand it, but now they are settling. But maybe the difference between the two of you was that you believed that this settlement, where one was too low and two, you didn't understand how they arrived at it. Is that right?
No, Chair, maybe some context to this.
Yes.
So I'm being given a document that says, please sign as support. Now, if you read the settlement memo, the memo that they're requesting to sign, talks about a mandate that was obtained for the board, from the board or board tender committee. I can just refer which committee is exactly in the memo, but they obtain a mandate to settle at 500 million rand, which I am not part of. They then enter this negotiation proceedings, which I am not part of. I then get to ask to compute this calculation, which is very different to what we're settling on.
Yes.
And then I'm asked, can you please support this payment? And I was like, but how do you want me to support this payment given that I've got nothing to do with what you actually have in the document. And I think that's the context where this is going. So her argument in this email was, well, originally your calculation was 2.1 billion, and that's already reflected there. So surely the board should realize that we are giving up 2.1 billion value when I say I'm settling at this 577 million. And that's correct. I mean, we don't disagree with her. But the insistence on that I must now sign as support was a question mark. Then why do you need my support if you already have this? And if you wanted my document, if you wanted my signature there, then at least refer something to which I can tie back to, except, I was not party to any of this, but I'm just supporting you.
What did you understand to be the value that she was attaching to your support for this for this settlement? In other words, was there something in the processes of Eskom that dictated that before they could reach a settlement in regard to a matter such as this, they should have your support? Or did she have some other reason why your support was necessary according to her? What was the value of your support in the whole thing? Why did she want your support and not somebody else's support?
Chair, from a process perspective, my support is not required from a delegation.
Yes.
If I go back to the original email where, please check paragraph 6, I'm about to settle a negotiation process and I want to know if my numbers are correct.
Yeah.
Well, one, we're disagreeing with those numbers.
Yes.
So I think probably her original intention was, I have reached a settlement, whatever the construct of that settlement was and whatever the outcome was. And I've also checked with the finance team that the calculations that behind the settlement are actually okay. And we were, based on this, already disagreeing with those computations. So I think her then settlement memo was, well, it doesn't really matter, irrespective, you're still giving up value. Do you know you're giving up 2.1 billion value? And I think we wanted to be very explicit that, one, if you wanted my support, then at least let me show you where I added the support.
Yes.
Other than that, I have added no value and no support to your process.
Yes. Okay. No, thank you.
Flowing from there, it's quite clear that you are not part of the negotiations.
No, Chair.
Yet you expected to support a memo which arises from a settlement negotiation that you're not part of.
Yes, Chair.
Now, you were referring, Chair, to page 82, and that you insisted that something must be added, and that's the only time you'll be comfortable in signing any memo. Is that what we see on page 82 with the handwritten inscription, what you wanted to be included?
That is correct.
Did you ever ask her, in the light of you, that is her now, accepting that Eskom was entitled to demand 2.1 billion, how do you justify this settlement that you are asking me to support now? Did you ask her a question to that effect?
Chairperson, we did.
And what was the answer?
The answer was, and I didn't ask her, I asked the attorneys, Rashab and Woodley from Cliff Decker.
Who were guiding her? Or
who was guiding her, or part of the process, or part of the negotiating team?
Yes. Yeah.
And essentially there were a couple reasons, and I can't remember all of them offhand, but there were a couple reasons why they could not settle at the 2.1 billion penalty. My recollection is that the initial 158 million rand that was originally deducted by Eskom, because Eskom applied the contract in that way, wrong or right, doesn't matter, their view was that it was going to be very difficult to argue against that application of the contract. So that was their first part. The second part, Chair, if I remember, was that the people that were in the employ of Eskom when this negotiation agreement, when the Optimum agreement was drafted, or some of the versions, are now employed by Glencore. So it would be difficult to call them on as a witness in Eskom's testimony when they actually, or in Eskom's favor, when they actually work for the opposing party now. There was also this consideration that said, if you apply a 2.1 billion rand penalty to Optimum, you will sink them. You'll liquidate them. They're just not cash flush enough to pay that amount. So those were some of the considerations that were taken into account in them coming to this deal. But that was a discussion between us and them. It was not something that I was part of, and I can't intimately or with detail talk about it.
Okay. And now, is it your handwriting at the bottom of page 82, or is it somebody else's handwriting?
That is my handwriting, Chair.
Oh, okay.
Now, what is interesting from what you are saying...
well, if your colleague wants to share something with you.
No.
Okay, all right.
Now, you are saying that one of the thinking was that if we were to claim this amount of 2.1 billion, we might sink this entity. So we know that at the time now it was owned by Tegeta. So it was important not to sink Tegeta. Yet others were placed in business rescue.
No, Chair, I'm not giving importance to this thing. I'm saying this is the feedback I was given. I'm not part of that process, and I did not assess that.
But at least we did tell the Chair earlier on that Optimum was placed on business rescue at some point because it did not fulfill its obligations with Eskom.
That's correct.
Yes. But we can't sink Tegeta at this time. You don't have to comment about that, it's fine. I just wanted to understand your last statement to the Chair that there was that thinking.
Yes.
Now, was your concern ultimately taken into account that there must be this insertion of this paragraph that you insisted upon? Was it ultimately, did it ultimately find its way to the final memorandum?
It did, Chair, and it found its way, so not in these words, but it found its way...
Go to page 84. 84. That's where the document starts, am I correct?
Yes.
And then what you might be looking for, but you are saying that not in so many ways was it included. It's on page 86.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, proceed.
No.
Page 86, paragraph 3.
That is correct.
Yes. Now, can you read what paragraph 3 says?
Subsequent to the issues of summons, Eskom recalculated an amount owing of 1.17 billion for the period under dispute. While the calculations could be verified, the basis of the interpretation is still under question.
But it's not exactly what you wanted to be included.
No.
Did you take the matter any further? Did you take the matter any further to say that I'm still not happy about this paragraph 3. It still doesn't show the loss that is going to be attributed to Eskom if you're to settle on that less amount?
No, Chair, I did not.
Maybe then deal with the last topic which you are addressing.
Well, before I see that, Mr. Naga, I see that the signatories to that memorandum at page 89, where it ends, Susan Daniels, Anuj Singh, and Majela Koko.
Page 89?
Yeah.
Mr. Naga, page 89.
Yes, got you.
Yeah, you see the signatories.
Yes.
And those are the individuals that signed the document, the
Yes.
memorandum.
Chair, there seems to be a page missing. As if you read the top right-hand side, it says 19204, and then it jumps to 19206. So I think there's probably a page missing here where I had
Yes, but as far as you know, who signed that memorandum?
It was, I mean, so 89, you are correct.
Sorry?
Page 89 is this, the memo is now recommended and approved by Machela Koko and Anonsi.
Yes. Yeah, the fact that there may be a page missing, which might be correct because the previous page, as reflected, is page 5. There is no page 6. Then there's that last page with signatures is page 7. The fact that there may be a page missing doesn't change the fact that the memorandum was signed by those 3. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. That last page, which bears their signatures, is the last page of this document. The missing page is not the last page.
That is correct.
Okay.
Let's now turn to the last topic. Mr. Chair, with this evidence, Mr. Naga will simply be laying the basis for another witness, Mr. Andre Pillay, who will complete the picture.
Okay.
Yes. Now,
and what page are we going to?
Page 16, paragraph 8.
Okay, thank you.
Now, from paragraph 8, Mr. Naga, you are dealing with the ABSA guarantee. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And can you give us context, pertaining to how you became involved in this guarantee and who are the parties to that guarantee, or who are the parties that were supposed to be in that guarantee?
Chair, on around December 2015, January 2016, it was call it the December holiday period or so. For some reason, I was not in the office. I can't remember, I was on leave or just away for a meeting, and one of my subordinates, Rehana Mullah, was standing in for me. And she received this guarantee, this ABSA guarantee.
Hang on. Will people please sit down and not be roaming around? Thank you. Yes, you may proceed.
So she received this ABSA guarantee and was asked to deal with it. When she read it, she didn't know what to really do with it and handed it back to the people that gave it to her. And we can't remember who actually gave it to her, but she gave it back to them saying, please deal with me on my return. I then received this guarantee early January, and it was left on my table, and it was said, it was given to me. I can't remember how it was given to me, but it was given to me and said, please deal with it. Chairperson, when you read this guarantee, it was, let me first upfront state, I don't deal with normally bank guarantees and stuff, so that normally gets dealt with by the Treasury team. But when I read this bank guarantee, it was a very badly drafted guarantee, in my opinion, in that it was difficult to see what were the defaulting terms and what was actually happening there. But it was a guarantee guaranteeing Tegeta in some way, shape, or form. So this, I then inquired from Vusi Mboweni, who was the head of primary energy at that time, and checked with him whether he knew anything about this guarantee. And he also verbally committed, or admitted, not admitted, he verbally confirmed that he knew nothing about this guarantee. Chairperson, in asking around, for some reason, this guarantee issue died. When I say died, meaning it somehow wasn't raised again.
Nobody pursued it.
No one pursued it. Fast forward to March 2016.
So when was it when you got the...
Around January 2016.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Towards the end of March 2016, which is very close to our financial year end, we received I received a request from the office of the CFO, and particularly Teresa Michaels from his office, requesting me to draft an accounting position paper on this guarantee. Now,
in whose favor was this guarantee?
It was in the favor of Tegeta. So it's in, yeah.
So ESCOM was issuing a guarantee in favor of Tegeta?
That's it, correct.
Yes.
So, Chairperson, I had then responded to to Teresa Michaels, and my response is reflected here, and if maybe I can...
I'm sorry. If the guarantee was pursued, are you able to tell us what Telkom would be saying, what would have been committing itself to and about?
Offhand, I can't remember, but I remember it was about a 1.7 billion rand worth of coal payment.
Okay.
I do reflect some of it in my email, Chair, if I can quickly get to it.
If you go to one of the emails are on page 99.
Page 99, it's actually on page 100. So,
Yes.
so page 99 is the thread of emails, and you can see the different people commenting on this topic. And I specifically, my comment to Teresa, or my response to Teresa, is on page 100. And if I can read, Chair, it says,
yes.
Hi Teresa, I'm not so worried about the accounting position paper. We can potentially draft on between us and us, meaning whether it's treasury...
I'm sorry.
Page 100 on top, Mr. Chair.
I've got it, but what he read is not what I see. What I see is I'm not so worried about the position paper. I think you may have said something else.
Okay,
instead
sorry.
of position.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
So it says, Hi Teresa, I'm not so worried about the position paper. We can potentially draft one between us depending on where the majority transaction activity takes place. More important is where we need to plan for a payment to be made on the 31st. We need some guidance on this, please, as this transaction seems to be completely off everyone's radar. For a payment to be made, we need all the PFM approvals, legal confirmations, cash to be booked, vendor details updated on SAP, conditions precedent, etc. Next week, everybody's on leave. Depending on how this transaction is done, the CFO and CE might have to sign off on a 1.7 billion single payment transaction depending on the Eskom DOA. So I think that's this guarantee contemplated a 1.7 billion rand coal purchase or payment of some sort.
Yes.
Yes.
So as you understood it, it would have been a commitment by Eskom to buy or pay 1.7 for coal.
Chair, if I can just read the second paragraph and then answer your question,
Okay,
I think it will give it better context. So I'm saying that if the approvals are not met, then what? I'm also not sure, and this is the important part to your question, I'm also not sure what the defaulting events for the guarantee are. Documents do not seem to be clear. Guarantee also seems to expire in March. So if these preconditions are not met, then what does everyone do? Do we extend the arrangement, or does everything fall away? What happens to optimum in the event and the business rescue process? So I think if you read the guarantee, those terms for default were not clear. And I think it was difficult to understand what this guarantee was about, and hence this email to them.
Okay.
And Chair, beyond this point, that's my involvement with this guarantee story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to pose, to take you back to a testimony. This part of your evidence will be ventilated through other witnesses. You mentioned earlier on in your testimony something that might also be relevant in due course when we are dealing with the witnesses for Eskom, that one of your fears, in doing whatever that you might have done, you fear that, you might either be punished like one of that employee who was suspended by Mr. Koko, the female employee, for supporting reductions on the coal transportation rate. Can you elaborate on that? Do you know the facts of what transpired in that situation?
Chair, I can't elaborate on it. I can give you some context, but I can give you the employee's name. I don't know if you want me to give it.
Yes.
Her name is Kiran Maharaj, and you can get the facts and details from Kiran Maharaj.
How do you spell the names?
Kiran, K-I-R-E-N, and Maharaj is M-A-H-A-R-A-J.
Mr. Chair, that concludes my questions for this witness.
Okay. Okay, no, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Naga. If we need to call you back, you will be contacted. But thank you very much. You are excused for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mkwena, I understand there is another witness.
Not for today, Mr. Chair. I'm told that he is coming on Friday. Mr. Oberman.
Oh, we have another one tomorrow.
I'm told that you are not sitting tomorrow and Thursday because you don't have a venue.
I was told that's Thursday and Friday.
Then,
so I was misled.
Unfortunately, I can't deal with those issues. I thought that it was tomorrow and Thursday. We can clarify that.
Yeah, can that be clarified? Which dates are taken by the owner of the venue?
It's 6 and 7, I'm told, Mr. Chair. Friday it's available, 6 and 7 are not available.
Oh, okay, all right. Witnesses for Friday or witness for Friday will be ready?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay, no, that's all right. We are going to adjourn. We are not sitting tomorrow and Thursday. We would have liked to sit, but the owners of the venue had asked that certain dates be reserved for them because they have certain special events, and those dates include tomorrow and Thursday. So that's the reason why we won't be sitting. The venue is just not available. We will resume on Friday. Before we adjourn, on Friday, should we start a little early, or will we finish? Will we be able to finish the witness within the normal hours?
Mr. Malega will respond to that, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Malega?
Chair, I suggest we start early because we have 2 witnesses on Friday.
Shall we start at 9?
9:30, and we can take a short lunch adjournment if necessary.
Or
because the witness comes from Witbank.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. If need be, we can add in the afternoon. Okay, we are going to adjourn today and we'll resume at 9:30 on Friday. We adjourn.